95% of AI implementations fail not because the technology doesn't work, but because humans won't actually use it. After 12 years consulting for all types of businesses, I've seen tons of perfect systems sit unused. Today I'm going to show you the exact psychology framework that actually gets teams to adopt the AI that you build, so stick around. You know what really loves change? Chameleons. They're literally born to do that. But humans, on the other hand, they'd rather keep their broken processes in place until the heat death of the universe than adapt to any form of machine that they think might be smarter than them. And that's where the biggest part of this problem lies. So let's look at a little story first. The 180K Paperweight. A company spends 180K on an AI customer service platform. The system was beautiful. It changed everything from 4 hours to 15 minutes response times. How amazing. It also handled 80% of inquiries automatically. It became the customer superhero that had no needs. 6 months later, it only had 23% adoption rate. The customer service team was still manually answering emails like they're boomers. The AI dashboard looked like a graveyard of unprocessed tickets. And the CEO was considering whether the whole thing was actually just one big failure. Spoiler alert, only one part of it was. So what went wrong? And it's pretty simple. Nobody told the humans how to be better at being human. The team was convinced that AI was going to replace them. No training on when to use it versus when to just let it work for itself. The champions weren't identified or activated. And the office skeptics poisoned the rest of the team faster than gas station sushi. So the brutal maths behind this is that someone invested 180K into the system and they only got 40K in actual value delivered with one very, very expensive lesson in psychology. But it goes beyond that, right? Because there are other things that get impacted. One is the human impact. Team members lost confidence in whatever the leaders were selling for the next iteration, and future technology initiatives were met with all forms of resistance, obviously because the first biggest one failed, and the best employees started to look for jobs elsewhere because they know the importance of AI and how useful it is to make them better at what they do. But then there's also a competitive impact because your competitors who are using this, they're going to surpass anything that you're doing if they attach it to the right people. Customer satisfaction scores stagnate in your business while massively improve in businesses that use this type of technology. And an 18-month window of opportunity is completely wasted because, again, they have the correct approach in dealing with this, so you're going to be far behind your competitors. So the first thing that we really need to address is why this happens everywhere. Because MIT released that report saying 95% of businesses fail. Now, there are many reasons why, but the human psychology aspect of it is that the traditional approach to implementing anything new is that you build a perfect system, you announce it like you're revealing the new iPhone, and then you provide training that nobody really gives a shit about, and then act shocked when no one uses it. When in reality, humans are weird about change. We hate it. You complain about the current process for years, but then when someone tries to take that away from you, it's like they're trying to steal your safety blanket. So you see the paradox here. You can't just shove something into someone's face and expect them to automatically use it or have your same views on it. And that's the importance of identifying the different people in your office, because these people dictate how your products and how your technology actually gets onboarded. So the first part of your team are the champions. They're natural adopters to anything shiny and new that could either benefit your business or sometimes even not. But they see AI and they think, holy shit, I can use this to automate the boring stuff and make my life better. They're pretty much like golden retrievers. They're enthusiastic about everything that they do, and that enthusiasm itself is contagious. So what they really want is to just be the AI wizard. They want people to see them as like, oh, hey, look at Matt on the sales team. He's amazing. I want to learn what he's doing. Look at his close rates. He wants to be that guy that's incorporated this into everything that he does, that he looks like the wizard. And what they fear is nothing because they're too busy being excited at how cool all of this new stuff is. So this can work in your favor massively, as we'll get into soon, but it can also be detrimental to you. And one of the things that you need to do when you're looking for these champions in your office is you need to understand whether their excitement is actually based in some form of logic or data or intelligence, or if they're just excited because they're in their late 40s and they're having a midlife crisis and they think that if they attach to something new and young, that it will make other people actually want to hang out with them. So I've actually seen that in my 12 years of consulting in so many places where the older people just say a bunch of buzzwords for this new technology. They're like, yeah, we totally need it. This is awesome. But then when you ask them why, you very soon start to realize that there's no substance behind their excitement. And I've seen that actually cascade into becoming problematic later on in the delivery process of whatever it is you're trying to implement. So just keep that in mind when you're going through this. There needs to be a valid reason for these people to actually be champions. And that brings us on to the second people. These make up the majority of the teams usually. again, depending on the age and what type of industry you're in, but they're fearful. And their characteristics are pretty simple. They're competent people, but they're having an existential crisis. This thing is coming in and causing massive change. They're convinced AI is going to make them more obsolete than a DVD player, and they look at automation like it's the Terminator coming to destroy their safety bubble. And again, this is something that I've seen in all my years of consulting, and it's really simple to find what these people actually want. They want job security and to not look stupid, right? But it's what they fear that really matters, because what they fear is what really drives their perception towards this thing. And for the most part, that's going to be things like job security and relevance, control over their work processes, professional identity and competence, and their comfort for familiar routines. The TLDR being that they're worried that a robot is going to come in and replace whatever it is that they're doing, and therefore take away their identity, their security, and their competence. So you need to address those things before you get in there. And again, I've seen this everywhere that I've consulted, but in the last 3 years, I was working for one specific client on a large team. There were a few consultants all brought in to do this cloud migration. And there was this one guy, he would bark at everything. I mean, he was literally berating people on calls. He would work at any chance that he got against this thing. Now, he was in his late 50s and he'd been in the organization for like 30 years. So you can imagine why he felt these things, this sudden change where he would no longer have this pod that he controlled, that only he would be able to decide who gets to do what and when, how that was changing his identity, but also taking away his security. He would have to work in new ways that were super scary. He wouldn't be able to just come in at 9 a.m., do his usual routine, and then clock out at 4 or 5. So the way to get him on board was some of the consultants refused to work with him, which is completely ridiculous because you need these people on your side. And the best thing to do is to actually lean into that, because behind every person who's super angry about something, there is another part of him that's just a genuinely nice guy afraid of losing everything he's ever worked for. And if you address that first, if you get down to the core of their problems, make friends with them, build some rapport, find out exactly what it is that makes them tick, you'll start to uncover these things naturally through the conversation of you guys becoming friends. And so ultimately, it was making friends with this guy that not only extended my contract with these people for years, but also helped us actually nudge this project along because we found ways of working together as a team to get things done. And finally, that brings us on to the skeptics. Now, these people are everywhere in life, not just in your workplace. But the point being is that they all share similar characteristics. They've seen every revolutionary piece of tech come in and go out, and they've heard the stories that this would happen if we just do this. And a lot of the time it ends up being bullshit. They've been burnt more than any ginger who goes out in the sun. And that creates this ongoing loop of, I know I'm right about this upcoming thing. So they roll their eyes so hard that it goes to the back of their own brain. But the problem with this is that because these people are really smart and there are studies that back up their worldview, they can become really problematic for you because they can actually poison this and keep spreading these things around data and objective truth that this thing might not work. For instance, that MIT study that says 95% of AI implementations fail, that's ammo for skeptics because they can just reinforce their own belief system using that as objective data, when it obviously only takes into account the fact that everyone who first implemented AI did it the wrong way. It doesn't mean that AI doesn't work. So what you really need to do with skeptics is look at what they're trying to achieve by being skeptical. And what they want is to be proven right that this thing is just another fad. There are whole reasons behind why they might feel that way. But at a high level, that's what it is. And what they fear is looking like idiots if they change their mind too soon. Because, I've been burnt like this before. What if I do it again? But equally, what if I change my belief system so fast that it makes me look less intelligent? Again, tons of underlying fears that you can address if it becomes super problematic. But it's far easier to deal with skeptics by simply just leaving them be. Let the data speak for itself. And we're going to get into this in just a second. That brings us on to the first part of this, which is where you really need to have a psychology-first framework. Because as you've seen from going through all of this, it's human psychology that's ultimately going to drive this. And the first thing that you need to do is activate your champions. You need to find the people who get excited about the new tools. Look for all of the golden retrievers. And it's pretty easy to spot these people because it's generally going to be people who are super excited about this change that's coming in, or at least the technology behind it. And they're already starting to see these use cases. So you will have seen them in your own office, or if you're a consultant going into someone's business, look out for these people. When you're talking or delivering something, they might even present themselves to you. I've had this tons of times where people come to me and they say, this is going to be really good. Can I get involved? Can I help you? Can I do something that would shed some light on the matter? And that brings us into step 2, which is where you really need to give them early access to this stuff. They don't need to have all of your knowledge or their entire big picture, but you do need to feed them some stuff so that they can get an understanding of where you want to go as fast as possible. because these guys can test it for you. They can give you ideas that you might not have thought of, and they can also give you insider team information. And when you have that, it helps you deliver your project a lot faster as well. And also, while they're testing this stuff for you, it also means that they can figure out the things that aren't working and the things that are working, and then they can really ride that message home to the team. And this in turn really makes them your champions, because they're going to go out and they're going to repeat this message to the rest of the team, and it really helps the fearful see some of the early wins as early as possible, which is obviously really good. But that's not the only thing that we can do for the fearful. You just need to remember that people love golden retrievers. And that brings us into step 2, because your biggest problem is going to be unfucking the fearful, because again, everyone, even the champions, will have some form of fear at some point that needs to be addressed. The only difference is that the champions are just so excited about what's happening that they're going all in. But for the most part, a lot of your people, even the skeptics, are going to have fear behind their skepticism, or just naturally fear towards the thing. And the fearful aren't stupid, they're just scared. You need to remember that. Scared people don't learn, they freeze. You can never teach someone or shove something in someone's face and say, just do this, just jump off the cliff, you're going to be fine. That doesn't work. Do you know how many times I've tried to convince people to do stupid things with me, and the only way to convince them was by showing them that I did it first, and then addressing the parts of them that they were worried about? This works the exact same way. So we need to make sure that we're hitting that underlying layer of fear first. So distortion 1, that's pretty common, is AI will replace me. Pretty straightforward, right? All you need to do is reframe that. AI handles the boring stuff so that you can focus on what really matters. These reframes change their mindset entirely. Something so simple where they think, oh, this thing's going to replace me. No, it's not about replacing you. It's about making you better at what you already do, or giving you the opportunity to focus on something that's actually what you want to do, rather than this tedious crap like replying to emails. Then distortion 2 is that I will look incompetent if we get this AI system. So the reframe is that AI makes you more competent. It makes you more powerful than most people, because you have this thing that augments your own intelligence. And that's the message that you need to bring home for this part. An analogy you can use is that surgeons use tools to help them better at being better surgeons. Pretty straightforward. We're not using the same tech from 200 years ago. We're using computers, we're using robots, we're using things to do things that we couldn't do before to make us better with our own skills. And that kind of ties in with distortion 3, where people say change always makes things worse. And again, you just have to reiterate that you're amplifying their current abilities to make them better at this thing that they want to do. Keep doing what works. AI just speeds up the slow parts. It's really that straightforward. But there are obviously going to be tons of fears. I can't cover every single one of them here. The point being is that you just need to find these underlying layers. And it goes something like this. You listen for their specific concerns. Who would have thought that listening works? You don't want to give anyone generic reassurances. That's never going to work, and neither is shoving something in someone's face. But then the second thing that you want to do is show personal quick wins as fast as possible. So find something that they hate. During your conversation, say, surely there's one thing you could tell me right now that you really just dislike doing. And they'll talk a little bit about that, and you say, okay, cool. Let's see how quickly we can get that done. If it's something small, just go and chop it up and show them what it would look like if they didn't have to do it anymore. Say, okay, cool. You got back 25 minutes of your day. What would you do with that 25 minutes? Could you spend this time getting better at the skills that you really enjoy doing, or any of the tasks that you actually enjoy doing? Stuff like that. And then point 3, to make them more strategic partners with you, is you want to position them as the experts. You know, we really need your help getting this done. Now that you've seen the value in it, can you really help drive this message home to people to show them how this made your life better? Can you teach someone in your department how to do this thing as well? The point being is that you want to make them feel like they're helping you get this thing done properly. They are essential to this job being done. And that makes them feel important, and it makes them feel like they have more purpose, which is really good change from someone who feels helpless because they're getting this thing taken away from them. Now they're in a position of power where they're helping people and training people and getting the project done. And that brings us finally on to point 4, which is create teaching opportunities. It ties in with point 3. Again, the more these people teach, the more it drives the message in their own head, but the more they can actually go and teach people. And the more they do that, the other fearful people are going to look at them and say, oh, he was once fearful. Now he's no longer fearful. What happened? They'll get curious. They'll get involved. And because they were once like he was, they're far more likely to listen to him, because he's not just an excited Labrador who jumps into everything. And that finally brings us on to step 3, which is letting the results bitch slap the skeptics. Because no matter what you do, you're never ever going to be able to convince these people. You don't argue with them. They have some form of conviction or belief system about why this thing is going to go the way that it's going to go. And like I said before, it could be tied to data, and to some degree it could be objectively true. But if we strip away all the data and all of the objectiveness, all that you're left is a person's own belief system. And just like trolls, it's pointless arguing with them. You let the results, the evidence of the data speak for itself. So the framework for them goes something like this. You let the champions and the converted fearful crush their productivity goals. Whatever they're doing, they're now doing great. and you focus on them doing their stuff first, then the skeptics start to see that. And all the metrics that they start seeing from the team who's now crushing it start to travel down into their worldview. So they think, maybe my skepticism isn't deserved. Maybe there's no more objective data. Maybe it can work in our environment. The point being is that this first piece of objective data that they had from a study saying that something doesn't work now gets overridden by people in their own office hitting home this message and crushing their goals right in front of them. So that will usually start to peel away some form of belief system, especially when they see their teammates excelling. So the point being for this is that you want maths and jealousy to do whatever your PowerPoint presentations couldn't do. Because once you've stripped away all of this objective data and they have these metrics, you will still have some people who refuse to accept that AI is the path forward. In which case you need to figure out as a business what to do with them, because if the peer pressure hasn't worked, if they're no longer accepting the reality that this does work in your business, all that you're left with is a fearful employee filled with distortions and a false narrative about whether AI is good or not. So you could have a conversation with them and you could address their fears because, again, at this point, their belief system is no longer objective. It's just based on their own distortions and their own perception. So you can address those using the same fearful methodology. And if it still doesn't work, then as a business, you probably need to cut ties with these people because they're no longer living in a real world. They're just living in this bubble that doesn't serve them or your business. So then I'm guessing you need some kind of roadmap. And if we look at a week-by-week reality check, it goes something like this. Week 1 to 2, you want to find your humans. These are the people who are going to be loving whatever it is that you're going to do. Or it's going to be the people who are hiding behind plants and having panic attacks because of this AI thing coming. Those are the two easiest ways to either spot a champion or someone who's fearful about this change. But the point being, you want to find these people as fast as possible because those are the people who are going to work in your favor. You need to give the champions early access within these first few weeks, and you want to start your one-on-one communication as fast as possible because this is going to help you weed out the fearful people so that you can help them address their fears during your first 2 weeks. Then we get on to weeks 3 and 4, and you really want to address the crazy here, and you need to acknowledge that these people aren't crazy. There are people who are afraid of ducks, which is pretty insane. But the point being is that everybody has this different perspective, and you need to focus on addressing that. Don't go in there all arrogant and think that these people are stupid just because they have these beliefs. That's the worst thing that you can do, because to some degree, realistically, some people can be replaced and their tasks can be replaced, in which case it's the organization's responsibility to give them something new to look forward to. But we do that later on. I'm jumping the queue here. During week 3 and 4, you really want to have these conversations. You want to make sure that you address the fears that some people have. And some of them are ridiculous, but it doesn't matter. Show how AI augments whatever it is that they want to do, how it makes them better, and how it's not going to replace them. It's going to give them a new identity with new forms of security and far more levels of competence than where they currently are now. That's the goal of week 3 and 4. Then we get on to weeks 5 and 8, and that's where the golden retrievers have been running around the office and everyone loves what they're doing. They're broadcasting whatever change that you're bringing, and people are starting to adapt to it. The fearful employees start seeing results, and even they are starting to get converted by the masses now. The skeptics start to notice that everyone else is starting to get shit done a lot faster. And they start questioning their own belief system. Was that study incorrect? Am I wrong about AI? Things like that. But they're probably still going to be using the same spreadsheets that they used to use just because that's their working methodology at this point. But then when we get to week 9 to 12, that's when you come down to the convert or get left behind stage. So when 70% of the team is using AI and they're all crushing their goals, and we have these dashboards showing their new metrics and how much better the system has served everyone, social pressure starts to work. One of us. That's when that really starts getting driven home into these people because there's no more data left to refute. The skeptics can't sit there and say, oh, this is not going to work, because that's just not how it is anymore. You've proven that this thing works. You have people celebrating it. You have people who were scared of it now being champions of this thing and crushing it in whatever their role is. So when it comes down to the end of it, the remaining 30%, they can either adapt or natural selection is going to cull them out of your business anyway, and they can go back to some Stone Age business that doesn't want to incorporate these things. And that's a very real thing. Like, to some degree, you will not get 100% of your business on board over time, and they might leave by themselves. You might have to force them out because they just no longer can keep up with whatever your competitors are doing and things like that. The point is that you need to make sure that you've done everything you can as a business to help these people not just by forcing them, but by literally showing them data and addressing their fears and giving them everything they need to grow. And beyond that, there's not much more that you can control or do. But you have to look at your business from a business perspective. If you've done everything you can and there's nothing else you can do, they're pretty much just handing in their own resignation. And this brings us on to the magical transformation. So after we've done all of this, what you should get when you see this is right, an 85 to 90% adoption, which is much better than the miserable 20% we had in the beginning. 100% of the fearful people should now be converted, and they've actually become power users. Because one of the things I've noticed a lot is in businesses where the people were really afraid of this tech or they never wanted to do it, as soon as you get them into it and they realize how wrong they were, they're like, holy shit, this changed my life. This is amazing. And they become bigger champions than the original champions. So your goal is to really convert these fearful people, because they're going to wonder how the hell they ever survived without this thing. And they're going to sing praises over and over again in between departments. And then we get on to the champions, who are now obviously partly the converted fearful, but they're already singing your praises like they're getting paid to do this kind of thing. And the skeptics will either quietly start moving on to this, or they'll just give up and move on, like we spoke about. But the bottom line for you as a business is that humans aren't rational creatures. We're not just like, oh, this sounds good, I'm totally going to do it. We're emotional, territorial, and we're scared of looking stupid in front of everyone. So you need to work with that reality instead of pretending like it doesn't exist. Because when you pretend like something doesn't exist, you yourself, as a business leader, are living in some kind of distorted bubble where other people's problems don't exist. And that's the first path to failure. So your next move should really be something like this. You want to stop treating AI adoption like a technical problem, because it's not. It's a psychology problem. And when you address that first, the technology adoption happens naturally. And you don't have to force anything. So it's a no-brainer for you. And it's far easier to deal with than trying to just force someone to do something. Because the truth is, companies who are winning, they aren't necessarily the ones with better technology or anything like that. They're the ones who understood how to deal with change and how to deal with human psychology. And all they did was build a culture around that. That's literally what building a cult is, which is culture. So focus on doing that. Focus on AI being a part of your culture for the benefit of the employees, not for something detrimental like taking away their jobs or force feeding them something when they don't understand it. And that's it, guys. This isn't rocket science. It's just human psychology, which at its smallest chunk is really just trying to get to know someone by being friendly with them at the end of the day. So if you focus on that, you're going to get far more out of your staff. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, check some videos on the screen right now. I'm sure they'll help you along your journey, and I will see you in the next one.